Welcome to Spy Collection's last episode for this year. Here is Anastasios, and before we go into this episode's spy artifact, we'd like to thank you for your support in our efforts to document several aspects of the espionage world. This year we increased our uploads from 1 per week to 3 per week. We released 7 new Spy Spots episodes, and in our Tradecraft Sunday series, we moved from 6 episodes to 10 episodes this year. None of our content is sponsored in any way or form, and due to our subject, most of it cannot be monetized in YouTube either. This means that your support and our efforts is what keeps this channel alive. Please tell us what you'd like to see next and help us grow this channel further to be able to provide even more high quality content from spy events and artifacts all around the world. And with that, let's look at the last artifact for 2024. This is our today's ornament. It's coming from the Central Intelligence of the United States of America, the CIA. If you guessed from its box that it's one of those 3D ones, you'll be correct. It's this. We have the United States, the Soviet Union, Cuba, and a Lockheed U-2 Dragon Lady spy plane in the middle, which was one of the most secret aircrafts that CIA operated at the time. That ornament was a tribute to the October 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, one of the closest calls to a full-blown nuclear war between the US and the Soviet Union. We chose this because today, 62 years after, the Doomsday Clock is 90 seconds to midnight. To understand how much closer we are now to a full-blown nuclear war, in October of 1962, the Doomsday Clock was 7 minutes to midnight. So this ornament is a great reminder of the past and the present, and our decisions based on those will pave the future. Back to the history, among the many dangerous things that happened around that incident, CIA's U-2 spy planes played a key role in keeping the US President Kennedy informed of what was happening. As we read in JFK Library and Museum, for 13 days in October of 1962, the world waited, seemingly on the brink of nuclear war, and hoped for a peaceful resolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis. In October of 1962, an American U-2 spy plane secretly photographed nuclear missile sites being built by the Soviet Union on the island of Cuba. President Kennedy did not want the Soviet Union and Cuba to know that he had discovered the missiles. He met in secret with his advisors for several days to discuss the problem. After many long, difficult meetings, Kennedy decided to place a naval blockade or a ring of ships around Cuba. The aim of this quarantine, as he called it, was to prevent the Soviets from bringing in more military supplies. He demanded the removal of the missiles already there and the destruction of the sites. On October 22nd, President Kennedy spoke to the nation about the crisis in a televised address. This omits an important incident with the U-2 spy planes that CIA was using for this crisis. That one of those U-2 spy planes was shot down that same period over Cuba. History Channel describes the entire incident best. On October 27, 1962, Rudolph Anderson Jr. struck through the stratosphere 14 miles above a planet tied up in knots. The US Airman's flight mission would dramatically escalate Cold War tensions and help precipitate the Cuban Missile Crisis. 13 days before, the US Air Force Major had flown one of the top secret reconnaissance missions over Cuba that confirmed the existence of Soviet missile sites just 19 miles from the American mainland. Anderson was not originally scheduled to fly this day, but he lobbied hard for the assignment when the mission was added to the schedule. Mission 3127, Anderson's 6th foray over Cuba as part of Operation Brass Knob, would be his most dangerous yet, with Soviet SA-2 surface-to-air missiles, SAMs, now operational and war seemingly imminent. Shortly after Anderson entered Cuban airspace, his unarmed, high-altitude U-2 spy plane appeared as a blip on Soviet radar. As the Soviet military tracked the intruding aircraft, their concern mounted that the pilot was photographing secret locations of tactical nuclear weapons positioned near America's Guantanamo Bay naval base. Our guest has been up there for an hour, Lieutenant General Stepan Grechko told the deputy. I think we should give the order to shoot it down, as it is discovering our positions in depth. with the commanding general, the only man authorized to order a surface-to-air missile launch, nowhere to be found. Grechko gave the order himself: destroy target number 33. Within hours, word of the shoot-down reached the White House cabinet room, which all day long had crackled with tension amid news that the Soviet nuclear missile sites were nearly operational and that another U-2 plane had accidentally flown over the Soviet Union, sending Soviet MiG fighters scrambling in pursuit. Assistant Secretary of Defense Paul Nietzsche said, "They fired the first shot," and President John F. Kennedy remarked, "We are now in an entirely new ballgame." Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy would later write in 13 Days, his memoir of the Cuban Missile Crisis, "There was a feeling that the noose was tightening on all of us, on Americans, on mankind, and that the bridges to escape were crumbling." Military leaders overwhelmingly urged Kennedy to launch airstrikes against Cuba's air defenses in the following morning. The president, however, correctly suspected that Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev had not authorized the downing of the unmanned reconnaissance planes, and he didn't want to abandon diplomacy just yet. For Kennedy and Khrushchev, Anderson's death crystallized the realization that the crisis was rapidly spiraling out of their control. It was at that very moment, not before or after, that father felt the situation was slipping out of his control. Khrushchev's son Sergei would later write, "Kennedy worried about retaliatory airstrikes would inevitably result in all-out war. It isn't the first step that concerns me, but both sides escalating to the fourth or fifth step, and we don't go to the sixth because there is no one around to do so," he told his advisors. So this ornament is encapsulating some of the most critical CIA activity from the Cold War to this day, and we aren't the first ones to display this ornament publicly. We found this post on X from December 2019, where Mark Gerolimatos said, "Nothing says the joy of Christmas like the Cuban Missile Crisis. Actual CIA ornament." And in terms of when this entered CIA's collection, it's likely around 2001. We also found this Facebook post of Magdes Marias from December 2020 that tells us how one of those ended up in his collection. One of my favorite Christmas ornaments, it represents the Cuban Missile Crisis with a U-2 flying over Cuba and the USA-USSR on opposing sides. This ornament was purchased at CIA gift shop back in 2001 when my family was given a tour of the then private spy museum. The museum has since been digitized and is available online, although they don't provide detailed explanations of the devices and their applications. We talked about CIA's gift shop in our 2024 ornament episode. Check it out if you'd like to learn more about it. The last publicly available reference that we could find for this ornament also came from Facebook, specifically from a 2017 post by The Flight of Ellie and Ed that said, "Official CIA Christmas ornament commemorating the U-2 contribution to the Cuban Missile Crisis. It depicts the three countries that almost triggered war and the plane that took the pictures." There are books, documentaries, films and countless stories about CIA's U-2 spy planes, so there is no chance that we can thoroughly cover this subject in a short video. But to keep things light, considering its holiday period, here is another trivia for CIA's headquarters. In CIA's close to the public museum, they also have this artifact, described as, "On May 1st, 1960, Soviets shot down U-2 pilot Francis Gary Powers over Sverdlovsk. He spent 21 months in a Russian prison. In 1962, Powers was exchanged for Soviet intelligence officer Colonel Rudolf Abel. Abel had been arrested in New York in 1957. This is one of two U-2 models crafted for Powers. CIA model makers made this for his March 1962 Senate Armed Forces Committee testimony about the downing of his aircraft. The wings and tail are detachable to show the aircraft's breakup after the shoot-down. We aren't sure if this is still the case today, but for many years a model like this, as well as other models of CIA spy planes, was hanging from the ceiling of the NHB. Actually, as CIA put it in this 2011 Flickr post, the 4-story, glass-enclosed atrium of the new headquarters building allows agency employees to enjoy the outdoors in good and bad weather. This area between the two towers is where pedestrian traffic between the original and the new headquarters building converges. hence a perfect place for exhibiting varied displays of interest to CIA employees. Suspended from the ceiling are reminders of intelligence history, 3 models of the U-2, A-12, and D-21 drone. These models are exact replicas at 1/6 scale of the real planes. All 3 had photographic capabilities. The U-2 was one of the first espionage planes developed by the CIA. The A-12 Oxcart set unheralded flight records. The D-21 drone was one of the first unmanned aircraft ever built. Lockheed Martin Corporation donated all 3 models to the CIA. Or more recently, in this 2021 CIA recruitment video, we still see the U-2 in the same place. And that was our today's artifact, an ornament with a very controversial story that just from a glance it immediately reminds us how fragile the world is and the crucial role that spy agencies play on a daily basis. We wish you a happy holiday period and we'll meet again next year. Thank you.